The new meta has arrived. With the 3.9 Metamorph expansion, both skills have received some love. The new Galvanic Arrow, previously Shrapnel Shot, is the true big brain player of the league. With the new Barrage support and the 2 additional arrows that come built into a Galvanic Arrow, we are able to create a really unique lightning shotgun effect. Every arrow we fire recreates a lightning cone, and we fire 7 arrows sequentially per shot. The result is a devastating playstyle that's entirely new to the game. One of the other unique parts of Galvanic Arrow is that increased projectile speed applies to its area of effect. This means we can get a coverage of half the screen with average investment into projectile speed. When played right, we can keep bosses at a distance and come in close for big damage to punish them in between their skills. Thanks to its versatility, we have a large range of items we can choose from, and we can scale the skill in many different ways. For this build we will be scaling lightning damage with some bonus cold damage on the side to help with clearing. This is just one way to play the skill. I've also seen great success from those converting lightning to chaos with Voltaxic Rift. Some of the pros of this build is that we do not need to fiddle around with gem swapping thanks to the new Barrage. We can roll with the one skill for all content and it holds up really nice. It also seems to be flying under the radar a little, so you can be that one unique bow person compared to the 1,000 Toxic Rain's Scourge Arrow players. A lot of the uniques I choose to take are pretty common, so it leaves the build both cheap but also solo Southbound viable. We also have a really nice curse on hit setup with our Hero device, which helps clean maps up and gives us power charges for more crit chance. You become a mega keyboard warrior as you manage all your flasks and reapply buffs like Blood Rage and Withering Step. Some of the cons of this build are that it is fairly low life and mechanical. Being brain AFK will really hit you hard here and you can't afford to stand in one spot for too long. This makes bossing a little harder and longer, as you will need to actively move to dodge their attacks. Another big thing to be wary of is that transitioning Galvanic Arrow into the mapping phase can be really awkward. It was a bit of a struggle for me, and I know others on the forum have also had troubles. You can eventually push through this, and if you take the right steps, might not have this problem at all. I'll address ways to circumvent the transition when talking about gear and gems. For this build, I've designed it around level 92. I personally rarely push past this level, and feel like it is a good build guide standard to aim for. I will show a level 100 chi, and have one in the path of building, just in case anyone wishes to really min-max this bad boy. The extra levels consists of primarily extra jewels and life, so don't stress if you stop before then. While leveling, I used Toxic Rain, so keep in mind these early trees are designed with that in mind. When you hit level 65, around Blood Aqueducts, you can respec your points into our ideal Galvanic Arrow tree. I'll talk about each one after, but for now, here are the passive trees. Pause or head to the forum guide for a more in-depth view. So first off, we have our level 21 tree. We take these points first, as when you're leveling as a ranger, you really need the damage early on, and we also want to grab the movement speed from Aspect of the Eagle and Quick Step. I was using Toxic Rain to level up, so keep that in mind when looking at these trees. And this is our level 21. We path down here and go for the heavy draw. We want to grab these as the damage over time is really good for Toxic Rain and helps us early on. We then jump to level 34. By this time you should be killing Dominus. We just grab the life and fill out our life and grab Fury Bolts. By Act 5 we get our first Ascendancy. I'll go over all the Ascendancies and our choices at the end of the leveling trees, but most of all we just want to grab life and keep pathing on towards the rest of our tree. Lethality is a good point to pick up as we get a lot of damage, and we also want to grab the Mana Leech as that's when we will be starting to... we want to get rid of our Mana Pot. In Blood Aqueducts we make the switch, so we get rid of unspec these points, we grab the lives instead, we get rid of Aspect of the Eagle, and we also get rid of Quick Step and these little points here. Another one to remember is to get rid of Deadly Draw and Heavy Draw, as we only had them for Toxic Rain, and that's the only reason why, but when we go on Galvanic we don't need them at all and they don't give us any damage. This will give us a lot more points to move around and pick up a lot of the damage like King of the Hill, Master Fletcher, and Primeval Force. Going for level 75, we basically just fill out the top here and get life where we can and pick up the extra crit. At this point in maps, the crit's really useful as we're starting to rely on our Herald of Ice procs more, and that'll be giving us our power charges. By the end game, we'll switch. Oh, another thing to note. We also grab piercing shots, but when we go to end game, we want to unspec out of this. For the end game, we unspec out of piercing shots as we'll have our Uber Lab, and by that point, we really don't need the extra precision. We grab over the life and evasion over here, grab the more elemental damage here with the forces of nature, and we aim for grabbing more projectile speed, and instead of piercing shots, we grab graceful assault. On the forum guide, it used to be different, but after some advice, I've decided to go for the onslaught effect, as that'll help with our movement speed around the map. On top of that, we also grab point blank. I was tossing up between this at first, just because its damage range is actually pretty small, but a lot of the time we are in the face of the boss, and it's really nice for extra damage. Other than that, we want to make sure we have Vow Pact, the Life Leech where we can, and it's all good. And for the level 100 tree, it's just grabbing extra jewels. So jewels here, some survivalist points, extra max life where we can, and a jewel down here. For the Ascendancy, we want to go Tailwind first. This is up to you, but I really enjoy Tailwind and I find it really useful. If you want endless munitions earlier on, you can grab that, but I find Tailwind useful as the action speed is really good and the evasion rating is really helpful early on. For our Cruel Lab, we take Fast Shot and Projectile Speed. Well, the projectile speed within Fast Shot. The projectile speed increases the AoE of our cone quite a lot because of Galvanic Arrow unique's interaction with projectile speed and area of effect. Other than that, Fast Shot just increases the damage as our projectiles travel further. By the time we get Merc Lab, we have endless munitions, which give us an extra arrow and more increased area of effect. This helps a lot as our barrage setup gets more damage per arrow we have, and this is a really easy one to get. On top of that, we get 50% increased AoE for the cone, further increasing our range. Last but not least is our Uber Lab, Powerful Precision. This one's really useful to get when you can get it. I'm currently level 85 and I still don't have it, but when you get it, you can unspec out of your points here and save 4 to spend elsewhere. On top of that, we get really big crit chance against targets we do pierce, and we pierce anything nearby and pretty much everything else as well. For our gem links, we want to link Galvanic Arrow with Barrage as our main priority. We then go elemental damage with attacks and inspiration to support our mana and give us huge damage. For our 5th and 6th link, I choose to go with added lightning and hypothermia. We have plenty of other options for Galvanic Arrow as well, and lightning penetration, increased crit damage and Mirage Archer would also do really well in the setup, and if you don't have the colours to afford these, you can definitely chuck them in. Mirage Archer in particular is a really unique one, and I'm personally going to test it soon, but it could be fun to play with having him cast a huge cone as well. For our Herald setup, we have Herald of Ice, Herald of Thunder, Curse on Hit with Assassin's Mark, as well as Wrath and Enlighten. Please do not ever think you have to have this in a 6th link. Herald of Ice, Curse on Hit setup is personally just fine as well, and the odds of us getting a 5 blue socket chest piece or bow is incredibly difficult. Feel free to move the Wrath and Enlighten around as you need, and you don't even have to use the Herald of Thunder. In my current setup, I can't afford to use it, so I use just the Wrath, and I have a level 1 Enlighten leveling up on the side. But please just move these as fit, as you'll find it's a bit of a struggle to get everything in the build. I don't have even my cast and damage taken set up, but it's still day 1 or day 2, so I'm just trying to get shit where I can. For our cast and damage taken set up when we can, we want to get a level 8 cast and damage taken, as that's a lower level and that requires less health to proc, and as seen as we don't have much life to begin with, that's the ideal level. We level out that to level 8, and we take Immortal Core at level 10, and our Summon Lightning Golem at level 10. These way they can both proc relatively often, and so we don't have to manually cast our Lightning Golem, because he dies too often anyway. We just chuck an increased duration in here just to help boost the Immortal cooldown a little better, so we take less damage. You could also slot in Molten Shell or Steel Skin, and those would work just as well, but the one time I did the brief math on it, it seemed to be that Immortal Core leans to the better side, but most people seem to disagree with that. For buffs and movement, I choose to take Withering Step. Blink Arrow was an option for a bit, but I find that Withering Step's really fun to activate, and it's just like a Quicksilver Flask, and it gives you that little bit of elusive you need to help crit the pack. On top of that, I have Blood Rage and Vow Grace and an increased duration. Vow Grace is a lot more important than Haste, as we get a lot of chance to dodge and dodge spell attacks, and that's really useful for when fighting bosses, as they're the main threats to our build. Blood Rage gives us a lot of attack speed, and it also gives us Life Leech, which is crucial. Other than that, on our boss setup, we want to have Ensnaring Arrow and Ballista Totems. This helps deal increased damage against bosses and it slows them down a little bit. It's important to note this is only really super useful on bosses that have only them in the arena, as the ensnared arrows only hit the final target and ensnare the final target. If you're in an arena full of mobs, it's going to still let us do more damage, but it won't actually slow them down. On top of that, I have a precision just level 3 with blood magic, just to help cap our accuracy and so we're always hitting. Level 3 is perfect and that's just fine to get along with everything else we need. And just to the side, this is how I leveled our Toxic Rain. I leveled Toxic Rain with Mirage Archer in a 2-link until I could afford to get the rest of the links. I didn't get a 4-link until around Act 6, it's not super necessary, but definitely helps if you can get it. Last but not least, we have our items. In the forum guide link in the description, I have a much more detailed description of all our items and all the Path of Exile trade links you can need, so you can just click them and it'll take you straight to what you want to buy. First up, we choose to take the Tempest Longbow. This allows us to do no physical damage, so we can ignore that mod on maps, and it gives us huge lightning damage. This is relatively cheap compared to the other bows, that's why I decided to pick it. Voltaxic Rift is another really good option, and if you really want to get maximum DPS, that seems to be the way to go. Another good option is Wind Ripper, as it gives you increased quantity of items found. For our weapon, for our quiver, we take Hiri's Demise or Hiri's Bite if you can't afford it. I'm rocking a Hiri's Bite and I'm doing red maps just fine. Hiri's Demise will come along as the league gets cheaper. A really good rare bow will match it. Other than that, it's pretty much best in slot for us. For our helmet, we want to take a rare helmet with max life and all the resistances we can get. We want to cap our resistances basically off the few rare items we use, so try and squeeze as much on here as you can to save the rest of other slots. For body armor, we take Hiri's Ire. This is an incredibly expensive chest piece to get, especially in a bow league, so do not stress if you cannot afford this. There are plenty of other options that'll work well. If you want to try a really fun option that's still unique, you could go Impulses, Broken Heart, as the shocked enemies exploding would be a really cool way to clear. Other than that, a normal rare chest piece which has resistances will free up other slots. You could go as chest piece with resistance and get something like a Star Conjures, or you could do any other options. For our gloves, I found that Thunderfist is the best to go. At first I had Winds of Change as the projectile speed was really interesting, but realistically it just wasn't working, and the added lightning damage from Thunderfist is huge. I didn't realize how much added elemental damage was going to help the build. At the moment I'm using this in a pseudo 5-link along with my Barrage, my Galvanic Arrow, elemental damage with attacks and inspiration, and then I get the 5th link from the gemets, from the gear itself. Other than that, if you have a 5-link on your bow or your chest piece, you don't have to worry about that too much, and instead you could try and chuck your Ensnaring Arrow in here to get the added lightning damage. For boots, it's pretty much the same situation as the helmet. We want to get as much resistance as possible, while also trying to get as much movement speed as possible. If you can get a 30% movement speed, you're doing good, but 25% and above will do just fine. For our amulet, we go with the Kurui Charge, or the original version of it. I can't remember the name of it. The Kurui Charge is an easy to get amulet, which we upgrade through Prophecy, and it gives us projectile speed, projectile damage, attack speed, accuracy rating, and movement speed. This is incredibly cheap, and once again, you could go with much more expensive options, but I was enjoying buying things very cheap and still getting fairly solid things out of it. It's also fun to watch our AoE get so huge with the cone, and that's why I'm playing this whole build to begin with. With our rings, I'll leave links, not in the description, but in the forum guide, as to weighted script sums that will help you find good rings, but you basically want to cap off the resistances you haven't got yet, and then just try and get flat elemental damage on attacks and elemental damage with attack skills. You want to squeeze life onto here as well, otherwise you'll be really squishy, and for a build that's already very low life, you don't really want that at all. For our belt, basically best in slot happens to be one of the cheapest in the game, is Prism Weave. It just gives us such huge flat elemental damage to attacks, and on top of that 30% wed. It's too good to pass up. We also get 7% elemental resistance, which is negligible, but it definitely helps cap out if you're looking for those final resistances. I definitely find myself in that position often. With our life flasks, we just want to get your classic Seethe and Staunching for remove bleed. Adzeres is the only real unique we want to get, as it's just best in slot for practically every build. And then I go with Quicksilver, Diamond, and Silver, so we can get movement speed, adrenaline, and critical strike chance. For our jewels, you want to find anything with attack speed, crit multi with lightning skills, flat alley damage, elemental damage, etc. And you might want to try and squeeze some intelligence on there as well to help get your auras leveled up. And if possible, max life too. It's not as stressed with the jewels, but if you really want to make your build less squishy, especially pushing in those last maps and possibly the upper tier conquerors, you definitely want to get max life wherever you can. And that's it for the gear. And that's the end of the build guide. Thank you for those that have been following on the forum and being patient. I know it took a while. I actually got a really bad migraine. It kind of ruined my league start, but I was trying to get it out as much as possible. And I also didn't want to just record T2 gameplay. And if anyone else has played the Atlas so far, you have a million tier 2s and 3s. So it made it pretty difficult to get gameplay. I just really wanted to push some red maps and get something out there that wasn't just showing off build stomping white maps. I wanted something respectable, and that's why it took so long. Hopefully you guys can appreciate that. If you did make it this far, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot. And thank you for following. If I missed anything, please leave a comment in the leave a comment in the comments or on the forum guide. Either way, it helps me out, and I like listening to all the responses. Thank you, and have a good day.